Hi, everyone. Welcome to class number 10 of the shared housing class for real estate investors. Today, we are going to do a deep dive into insurance relative to shared housing and at-risk population. Before we get into that, I just want to touch on some important forms. Right now, you are looking at the house rules for all populations, and we have already gone over these in detail. I just wanted to point out that this is a short version of that. It's only 4 pages, and it does allow you to put in the property manager's information because you should have a property manager assigned. That way you can, of course, be running your business and not working inside of the business as a property manager. And having the property manager or even yourself when you first set up your house put your house rules on the whiteboard is really important. So that way, everyone who lives in the house can always refer back to these and they don't have to pull out their signed agreement. Of course, if you change your house rules from time to time, you would want to go ahead and send those out to your residents and then also have your property manager update whatever is printed and taped to the whiteboard. So I just wanted you to know this is going to be in your documents package as a reminder to have your own house rules with your own logo and information put up inside the house for everyone to refer back to. Moving on to another important form here. This is an infraction notice, and when a house rule is broken, you or your property manager would want to immediately fill this out. So you would put the resident's name, the date, you would refer to the rule that's been broken. And it's really important that you can list that, meaning rule number 1 of the house rules dated October 8th, 2023 was broken. That way, the resident can very clearly refer to those house rules and see that they broke number 1. Now, how would you know that such and such rule has been broken? Well, normally another resident will report that to you or to the property manager. And you'll want to encourage all the residents to send that information via email to whoever you have in receipt of that. So if you have a virtual assistant who is actually a vetted volunteer for your organization, then you would want to make sure that you have it in writing, correct? And normally you would have a phone call with the resident as well. And again, if this is not you operating your own house, then normally it's going to be your property manager or your house president. Now, you'll normally have 2 or 3 reports of something before you put together an infraction notice. And then that way you know that it's legitimate, because if a few people have experienced something similar, like one of the new residents is acting strange and they feel like that person might be abusing alcohol, for example, and it's not a sober living house where you guys have an agreement to give a breathalyzer, but you still have somebody who is abusing alcohol, you'll have multiple people report that in short order, in which case there in itself it's probably pretty valid. And if you contact the resident, they'll probably tell you the truth and look to move out of your house into a detox facility. People generally know what's going on for themselves and then their roommates, and they'll only tolerate it for so long. They actually do want help if you hold them accountable in a kind way, as kind as you can be, given the circumstances. And, we're now able to announce shelterregistry.com as an outlet or a platform where people can list their recovery houses and different levels of shared housing. So that way people can move within the continuum of care. And the reason that this is important is because when you write someone an infraction notice, they might want to leave your shared housing, which is fine. And at that point, right, because you'll see here that the desired outcome for your operation is such and such. The desired outcome for the resident might be that they want to either go to a higher level of, a NAR recovery house, meaning they might want a level 3 house instead of a level 2. And normally a level 3 is going to have transportation for them. They might have require them to do an outpatient program. And so there might be more expenses involved with that. They might even want to transition up into a detox facility, an inpatient facility. And we're hoping that operators will start to list their locations on shelter-registry.com. So that way everyone in the United States can move people through the continuum of care. Now, some people might not have money or health insurance, and so they might look to go to a free shelter. And again, you would want to check shelter-registry.com and see if there's a free shelter in your area that has an open bed, so that way they can transition out of your house. And here's another important form. This is an affidavit of residence. And so what you're going to find out with at-risk populations is that they may not have a residence, or they might be using their grandma's or their parents, somebody else's address. And sometimes what comes up is that they need to get some type of benefits. So that could be food benefits or, a new bank account. And that company or that government agency will ask them to provide proof of wherever it is that they're living. And as a foundation, or depending on how you're operating your shared house, if it's an LLC, you still may need to provide this affidavit of residence because this person is in fact living at that address. And so they might come to you, one of your residents might come to you and say, can you please provide me verification of residence? And this is the form that you would be looking for in your documents. And you can, of course, modify this. In fact, I'm recommending that all of our forms you guys need to modify. You, of course, need to change your logo. You need to change the contact information. And you need to go through this. I would recommend doing it with your own attorney. And I'm going to recommend an attorney on the next class when we get into more of a deep dive on LLC versus nonprofit, and then I'll recommend an attorney. In fact, they have multiple attorneys there. And so this class, I just want to focus on insurance and a couple of these forms. So we'll keep going here as to on this affidavit. It's a lot like verifying, if your child goes to school, you have to prove that you live in that district. And so a lot of times they will ask for the house agreement, and then maybe a recent rent receipt and or a utility bill for the resident or for Katie's House Foundation. And then, of course, the signed affidavit of residence. And so you and the resident or the property manager should be able to collect these documents in short order because it's easy enough to fill out this form and sign it. It's easy enough to pull their house agreement, which a lot of times is not a lease, depending on how you're operating. And then they'll have paid you at some point. And so between the house agreement and then the payment that you might have, maybe it came from a government agency, it still should match, the name, the property address, meaning the name for the resident and the property address. That way, the government who's issuing food stamps, for example, can see, okay, Jack Smith does in fact live in our county at this address, and we will give him food stamps, or her or they. And then if they request a utility bill, you're going to have to look and see maybe if the resident has a cell phone bill that they have changed over. Maybe they get it online. Generally, a cell phone bill, they can go on the website and they can log into their account and they can update that address, because it's not actually being mailed to them in most cases. Most cases, it's just something that is electronic and they can print that off. And so then they would have a utility bill being their cell phone bill. So a lot of times that's not going to be an electricity bill or a water bill, because if you as a foundation or you as a landlord have those in your name, because the people are not responsible for paying those directly, that's a shared expense instead of one person's expense. Then that utility bill would not be in their name, but it might be in your LLC or your foundation's name, which again would match the house agreement between you and that person, your resident, of course. I do want to caution you that in some cases, when people start getting mail to the house or the location, that may establish a landlord tenant relationship. You're going to have to really look at your states for those rules, and then also the legality of how your company is set up, which is again why it's going to be really important to do this deep dive today. And then on the next class, make sure that you are looking at the state that you're operating in and that you have set up things in a way that you want them. And if you have an attorney that they would recommend. So moving forward from this form here, we're going to start now into the insurance, which I know most people who want to go into shared housing or any type of halfway home, tiny house village, all these different kinds of things, foster care, etc., anything in the social services space. This is where they normally get tripped up because the insurance is so expensive that it doesn't make financial sense. And so I want you guys to know that this company, SEMA, is available in all 50 states. They're an insurance broker for all types of insurance. And my team, we had to contact so many insurance brokers to finally get to SEMA. And we have different kinds of businesses, the people that are committee members, and a lot of my friends that do all kinds of things, which I'm sure you're in the same boat probably if you're on this class. You have lots of insurance brokers, or you can Google them, whether they're nonprofit or they're LLC. I just don't want you to spend weeks and months being frustrated that you can't find a broker who does what you need for a price in the state that you're operating in. So SEMA, please remember this. Call this number. Ask for any one of their brokers, and they will help you out. Now, like I said, they do all kinds of insurance, and I'm, going to be careful what I get into, because what I have insurance for might be different than what you need. So that's why I'm just giving out this information, which is what was recommended to me to give to you, is this number here. But this document will be in your document package. Now, if you Google nonprofit insurance, this is what will come up. This is another document that will be in your package. And so this is just from me simply and my team Googling nonprofit insurance. Now, I do have LLCs, I have C corps, I have S corps, right? I have different kinds of, that I have two nonprofits. And so this particular nonprofit insurance can be utilized in combination with an LLC. And I believe SEMA has also insurance companies that can be used with an LLC or a nonprofit. And so these are just things that you need to be clear about when you are going to an insurance broker or direct to a carrier is they are going to ask you, are you an LLC? Are you a nonprofit? Are you both? And you have to be able to know what you are. So make sure that you take class number 11 so that way you can get clear on that, and number 12 as well. So you set up everything the way that you want it to be set up, because the first thing after setup is going to be insurance. And this is an option for you. You can Google it, like I said, insurance for nonprofits. And this is the website that will come up. Now, I do want to tell you that we were actually offered this from our broker at SEMA, and that is also how we found it. One thing I want to say here is that Nonprofit Insurance Alliance, what I just showed you, it does not operate in all 50 states. So when we're talking about insurance, which I actually was a licensed insurance agent, I was recruited into insurance in 2010. And there are layers to insurance. And so if you're not very familiar with insurance, let me explain a few things. Number one, you have a broker or you have direct to the carrier. Working with a broker, I definitely recommend, as long as that person is competent. Once you find a competent broker who you get along with, you want to ask them if the type of insurance that you need, if they have carriers who do those states. And so again, the Nonprofit Insurance Alliance operates in only 32 states and the District of Columbia. So if somebody tells you to go and use this company, make sure that you very quickly find out if they're operating in more states. So for example, we operate in Alabama. That is not on this list. And we could have wasted our time trying to do business with this company or this broker, and they could have missed the fact that we're in Alabama, and that would have been frustrating for everybody, which is why it was great to find a good broker at SEMA who shared this information with us and also pointed us in the right direction. So moving on to nonprofit social services insurance. This is a carrier called the United States Liability Insurance Company. Now, you cannot go directly to this company. You have to go through a broker who has a relationship with them. And this company, United States Liability Insurance Company, they do offer coverage in all 50 states, unlike that last one that I just showed you. So they do Alabama and the other states. I would just recommend, if you work with a broker, that you ask for United States Liability Insurance Company, or if you're in one of those other 32 states and you want to get a price comparison, then you can always get a comparison that way. A lot of times when you have an application going with a broker, it's a lot like a mortgage loan, where they will take that one application and they will submit it to all of their different insurance companies. And so you want to be very honest and also accurate with your insurance application, and not try and go from broker to broker and do multiple applications to multiple carriers, because they're probably already all working together anyway. We do have another insurance broker that we like to deal with because he is a licensed attorney and he specializes in insurance litigation. And, that's somebody who we, of course, work with on some of our policies and, related to social services products as well. And that's not through SEMA. Um, but I just wanted to let you know that, going to SEMA is a good way for you to get access to a lot of different coverages and a lot of different carriers in all 50 states. Now, I'm going to tell you how to read and fill out this form from a high level perspective over the next 40 minutes, but you have to decide with your attorney and your insurance broker how you want to fill this out for your own company. So again, this is what I'm going to go through is high level, being that I had an insurance license for some time and also that I was a mortgage underwriter for, over 10 years and these kinds of things. This is really important to making sure that you get a policy, one, that you get approved, and two, that it's affordable. A lot of people have failure to launch because they don't get this policy or a social services type of nonprofit policy or something for their LLC. Really quick, I do want to tell you that some people might recommend that you just have an LLC. You're a normal landlord. You're operating a normal rental. It's a short-term rental. It might be midterm. It might be long-term. And you just have that normal landlord coverage. That's up to you and your attorney if that's what you want to do. And then you can layer that landlord policy with another type of policy if you would like. Of course, that policy may or may not cover contents because the person who lives inside the house might have their own rental policy to cover their own contents. And so you're going to want to decide if you pay $20,000 to put furniture into the house, you're probably going to want a policy that covers $20,000 worth of furniture. Heaven forbid the house burned down or it's flooded or something happens and you can't recoup the $20,000 worth of furniture. A lot of times at-risk populations are not going to go and get themselves a rental policy because it's not their furniture. So again, we're talking about layers of insurance here. Let's get started on going through this application so you can see how this all ties together. So of course you would put your organization here. Let's see, instant quote is not available for accounts with losses in the past 5 years. If there's a lost history, please complete section 1 and submit details in a claim supplement. I'm going to tell you it's going to take probably 2 weeks to get yourself a policy before you can be operating in this space unless you want to operate without coverage. So you're going to want to put your company name here, the location, mailing address. This is very basic. Your web address. This is important because the underwriter is going to go and look at your website and try and figure out what they're actually insuring. So if you're telling people on your website that you deal with everyone and anyone, then that underwriter might be a little bit concerned because does that mean that you're dealing with people who have a history of, violence and or theft or arson or sexual misconduct, in which case that underwriter might decline you because they don't want to insure really high risk scenarios when you're new to this space. So your website will be important. Be sure you put on your website whatever it is that you want them to insure. So if that's foster kids, then that's what you're going to match your application to, right? Because if you're advertising online that you want to have houses or you have a house for foster children, what's the age? Are they very young? Are they aged out foster care and they're 18 and over? And, these kinds of things, it really should match. So keep that in mind. It might be a couple weeks between you do your website and you do your insurance, and maybe you have refined things or completely changed things altogether for some reason. But if you want to deal with people that are human trafficking victims, keep that in mind, right? That's going to be clear on your website. That's going to be clear on your insurance application. If you're dealing with veterans, it's the same thing. So I hope you guys are understanding the gist here. Number one, it's going to ask you if you are a nonprofit with a tax exempt status, right? Do you operate as an abortion clinic, adult daycare, children's camping, foster care, halfway houses for ex-felons, nursing homes, etc.? If you have a suicide hotline, that's probably going to be a little bit higher risk. This is none of what we're going over is legal advice, you guys. I've already made that clear, I think, throughout these classes, or investment advice. This is just me letting you know my experience that if you have a suicide hotline and you're trying to talk people down from committing suicide, that could be a pretty risky type of operation. Up to you and your attorney to decide if that's what you want to do. Has your organization had bankruptcies, etc.? Have you had your license suspended or revoked, or is it under investigation? Any officers or board members been convicted of felony or arson? Do you have operational smoke or heat detectors? Do you have, the building was built prior to 1978? If that is true, then has the wiring, 100% of the wiring, is that connected to functioning and operational circuit breakers? If it's prior to 1978, is there no aluminum or knob and tube wiring? These are important things, and you're going to want to double check these to make sure that you have the coverage. And you can ask your insurance broker if you need help. And then you get into things like, are you an animal shelter or rescue, big brother, big sister, a garden, a caregiver, conservator, counseling? Are you a food bank? Are you a group home? Are you healthcare, historical, etc.? So you'll see here in group home, you'll need to put the square footage of the place and you'll need to put the number of beds. Then you get into hospice, mental health, residential shelters, senior activities, thrift store, vocational, youth committee center, etc. So please be sure you know what you are. If you're going to check residential shelter, do you offer that for battered women, halfway houses, homeless shelters, the number of beds, and then your square footage and the number of professionals here? And so on your first house, what this might look like is that you either are a residential shelter or you are a group home. And then maybe your house is 2,000 square feet and maybe you have 5 bedrooms and you have 10 beds. And you already know that you've run your numbers. So you needed the 10 beds to cover your mortgage payment and your insurance. Just so you know, it's probably going to run around $4,500 for the first year. I would say somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 for the first year. And you're going to probably need to pay all of that up front for just this particular policy. This is not a homeowner's policy, which covers the structure. And then we'll talk about the contents. This actually can cover the structure though, too, if you wanted it to. But this is normally overlaid on top of a homeowner's policy, which covers the actual walls and the roof. And then normally there's a contents policy, which covers whatever is inside the house, like the TVs. And then this policy here for residential shelters or halfway homes is basically covering your operation because you're having people live inside that house who are at risk populations, meaning that if it's foster care, even if they're 18 years old, they're aged out foster care. Has anyone ever taught them how to cook before? Is that something you're going to ask on your application? Because if you let several of 18-year-olds into the house out of the family court service and you don't have a house manager there to help them. So that's a house president, not a property manager. Property manager is just a normal person who manages the maintenance and the move in and the move out. Somebody who actually lives inside, like a house mom or a house dad, or they don't have to live inside, but they certainly have to be aware of who does live inside. So that way they can help them to some degree, depending on the type of shelter that you have or halfway house that you have. If they're independent or if they're 18 years old, they're probably not real independent yet. And so they might cook with that temperature being really high and they could set the house on fire. This is what this policy is for. It's the type of people who you are welcoming in to the house. And that could be the same for people who are on drugs and alcohol. So if you're operating a level 3 NAR house or a level 4 facility, that's the same thing. They could be on drugs and alcohol and light the house on fire. Now, in a short-term rental, Airbnb, you would just never know if those people are doing drugs and alcohol in your house. They probably are because they're partying in some cases. So especially if it's in a party area. And that's why, the neighbors do get frustrated with short-term rentals and Airbnbs and things like that. So again, you just have to pick who do you want to serve and make sure that your cash flow and your insurance are taking care of things for you. It's part of business. So you're going to see here that you need to list out what your team looks like. So organizations with professionals, do you have any of these helping your organization? In a NAR level 3 house, you probably are going to have degreed professionals that either live there or come in each day. In a NAR level 2 house, they are probably not degreed, but you might have a full-time or a part-time, house manager that either does or doesn't live on site. And then you're going to want to put, is it construction, frame, the type of deductible that you're looking for, your insurance, 80%, your building, your constructed, et cetera. And so this is where you do find this particular carrier will offer structure insurance and contents insurance. And this is where you're actually telling them what the house is made of. So let's just say that it was built in, 1980. It's 2,000 square feet. And you would like it to be covered because the value of the property is maybe, let's say 500,000 or 200,000, depending on what area you're operating in. And you'll want to increase that normally by about 20% is what I was told to do. So that's my personal experience. And then the personal property is what's inside of there. So if you bought the washer, the dryer, the refrigerator, one or two of those, the dishwasher in addition to the laundry washer, and the TV, the couch, the beds, did that come to $10,000? So maybe that's what you put in here. And that's probably where you're going to want to be, is around $10,000 in personal property. We've already gone over that list in detail in a previous class. I believe it was class number 4. Now let's go over some of the really important stuff here over the next 25 minutes to make sure that you or your team are looking at these questions in a way that you can look at them however you would like, but how we look at them and what our experience was, some of these questions were more important than others. For example, does your organization provide accident insurance or workers' compensation insurance for employees and volunteers? So remember, insurance is layered. Employee is a very special word when it comes to business. So the first thing you're going to want to ask yourself is, do you even have any employees? Employees are going to be W-2'd. They're going to normally be on your payroll, and you're going to be paying taxes on their behalf into the state. So an employee, that word is just a very special word, denotes those things that I just said. Your volunteers, do you have volunteers for your organization? Are you required to have volunteers for your organization? So you might want to read through the entire insurance application, which this is 9 pages for this one, and find out, are you required to have volunteers? Because if you are, then you're going to want to consider, do you also need to request accident insurance or workers' compensation? Now, employees, my understanding is that if you have employees who are on payroll and W-2, by law, you're supposed to have workers' compensation in some states. And then workers' compensation normally covers accident insurance. So you would normally already have those things in place if you have employees on W-2 and payroll. Now, volunteers might be paid, they might be unpaid, and they might be W-2, they might be 1099. If they're not paid at all, then maybe none of that. So again, just pay attention to the words that are being used. Don't go through this really quickly and get yourself declined, because there's not a lot of insurance carriers that are going to want to insure you when you first get started out working with high risk populations. This is new and they know it because you don't have a history of it. They ask you how long you've been doing it right here on number 12. So that's number of years the organization has been in business. Now, if you have an LLC, maybe your LLC for that particular property address that you're using that you want to insure with this kind of coverage, maybe that has been a seasoned LLC. And, I don't know how you want to portray that to the insurance carrier, because I don't know how long that you'll have been working with high risk populations. But certainly be honest. And here are number 11. This is an important one. Are there 2 or more means of egress from each floor having public access? So is there a window and is there a door? Are they both operational? Normally, they're going to need to be 3 feet off the ground, depending on what state they're in, what state the house is in, and do they actually open and close? Remember, that's important because you don't want those windows painted shut. And if they are painted shut, you should have a glass break on them in most cases. Actually, in all cases, people have got to get out those windows. Now, does the organization contract with physicians, including psychiatrists and nurses, that do not provide certificates of malpractice? I know I'm going up a little bit. Dancing around on this. I'm sorry about that. That one, number 10, self-explanatory. Does the organization require background checks on employees or volunteers, which include sex-related or child abuse claims? That's up to you guys. We do background checks on employees, volunteers, and residents because as the CEO, that is what I would like to happen. So that way we know what people's backgrounds are. Now, we also take backgrounds on the residents, just so you know. So residents are not on line number 13. And we would take a background check from a police officer or a social worker or someone else, because a lot of times there might be social services involved and they already know that person's background. And so they can tell us for the residents, if they've been in foster care all their life, they know that history for that person. Or if they're able to run their criminal record themselves, the police can, then they can actually tell us. And so, again, the words here matter because it's only asking about employees or volunteers. And then you have to decide what you want to do with regard to residents, unless it asks you about that. So moving on to number 14, does the organization employ or accept the services of persons with a criminal background? Does the organization employ or accept the services of anyone who's ever been accused of an abuse or molestation claim? I would be thinking, if I were the underwriter on this, that these are high-risk situations. And does the organization have a formal orientation program for new hires, volunteers, which includes a review of the organization's sexual abuse policy? So remember, this is asking for new hires and volunteers. And if you are hiring people or you're having volunteers work for you that are, formal volunteers doing things for your organization. So that could be a little bit different in my opinion, and probably in some of our attorneys' opinions, meaning a licensed real estate agent is probably acting in that capacity when they're showing a property. They're not volunteering unless we ask them to volunteer to do things outside of their normal licensing. I know that a licensed agent or property manager has already gone through and had their fingerprints done. In a lot of cases, they're going in and out of people's houses. They're dealing with people's money. And so I'm generally not going to bring a licensed real estate agent or property manager into my organization as a volunteer because I'm going to limit what they can do because the scope of work is what we agree to, which is not going to be a volunteer relationship. Now, having a formal orientation program, we actually do have one. It's a few hours long. If you guys ever want to tap into it, I'm willing to share that with you, because when we did our first recovery house, a level 2 is what we were moving towards, and we thought that it was very prudent to have that particular individual go through a more extensive formal orientation program. Yes, we have a basic one. And also, there is stuff that covers just the sexual abuse policy, and then there's covering things that are not related to a sexual abuse policy, right? So I just want you to know that we're happy to work with you on talking more about this particular item as necessary, but you guys should write your own or go with your attorney or go online and look for a sexual abuse policy if you in fact do have new hires and volunteers, which are titled in such a way. Now, does the organization monitor staff's day-to-day interaction with volunteers and clients, both on and off the premises? So that's something that you guys will need to decide. I would recommend that, yes, they should be monitored just, in some way, day-to-day interaction with volunteers and clients. So do you even have staff is the first question, or is it just you? And are you interacting with the volunteers and clients And are you doing that on email or text? In which case, you probably can pull that information pretty easily off of your phone and email. Now, abuse and molestation limits. This is if somebody claims or in fact it does happen, you may want to decide on having some type of coverage. I don't believe that the landlord policy or a contents policy or an umbrella policy, nor I don't think those cover abuse and molestation. Whereas when you're dealing with really any type of population, you'll probably want to have that coverage for peace of mind. Does your organization operate a thrift store or food bank? Of course, if you're doing food and non-perishable items, that might be something the underwriter is wanting to take a look at. Does the organization provide any warranties of quality or safety on any merchandise? And then number 20, your ratio of staff to clients. So if you have 10 people living in one of your houses, that would go here, 10 clients. Do you have one staff member? So that might be yourself. It might be the house president. It might be somebody who's coming in on a level 3 that has some type of license to manage those 10 people. So definitely take a look at that. In my business and management training, I have always thought and been told, if I remember correctly, that normally there's one manager to every 10, employees or clients, depending on how much help those individuals need. So your history of loss, you're going to want to put this here. This is for general liability and professional liability over the last 5 years. They're looking to find out if you have a history of that kind of stuff. Getting into hired non-owned auto eligibility. Do you have a motor vehicle liability policy in place? Do you own any or lease any? Does your organization use hired or non-owned vehicle with, this is if you're driving people around. So if you are going to have a van and charge more to drive people around, then you're going to want to look at this, especially if it's hired or if it's non-owned. This is just getting into that coverage. And my understanding is that this particular carrier does require the person who's driving that vehicle to have this number 27, which is a minimum of 100,000 or 100,000, 300,000. Otherwise, they will put it in place. So this is for an employee or a volunteer. And this would be relevant if your house manager is driving a rented vehicle or their own vehicle, and they are taking people to outpatient therapy. And so you'll want to ensure that that is covered, because you as the organization are actually, asking or telling that volunteer or that employee to go do that on behalf of the business. Now you can ask that employee or that volunteer, that's what it's saying, is you can ask them for a copy of their own personal auto liability limits, and it might come back that they already have that. But the point is that you need to ask that person and then have them give you proof of it. So you have it in your records, and then that way you can answer number 27. Number 28 is the number of people driving on behalf of your LLC or nonprofit, and then how frequently. And getting more into the property, this is, talking about the actual house itself. You can decline to have the house covered if you know that the owner of the house or the building already has this coverage. And so what that means is that if your LLC owns a single family house, for example, and is letting your nonprofit lease that house, then your LLC is probably going to already have the structure insurance, and it may or may not have contents insurance for what's inside the structure. But you can tell SEMA that you don't want to do number 31. You can tell them you don't want the structure covered or you don't want the contents covered. You're only looking to cover the nonprofit operation or whatever kind of operation you have, social services under an LLC. If that is something that I'm not sure if they do that with this particular carrier because it says nonprofit at the top. But if you have an LLC, you would have to ask if you can still use this application. And again, if number 31 is applicable because you already have a policy. So just read through this. Is your building, do you have sprinklers? Normally that's commercial, but you'll want to talk with your broker. And also you'll need to consider if you have a commercial operation or a residential operation. We're dealing in houses and we are not required to have a sprinkler system in some cities, counties, and states. And number 32, you're just going to have to look at your codes. And this is not really an insurance question as it relates to the codes, right? The codes are whatever the codes are. Also, the codes can be defined by how many people live in that structure. And so I don't know how many people you're going to have living inside whatever kind of residential or commercial building that you have. But number 32, just answer it honestly is what I would suggest for, of course, that's what I do. You can look up all that stuff for your own operation. Number 33, is there commercial cooking? Deep fat fryer. These are things that are going to be dangerous. Is there a cleaning contract in force with an outside firm? So remember, this is maybe number 33, in my opinion, is touching on the fact that if you would have said that you're operating a kitchen, like a food kitchen, then it's probably asking more information about that. So try and keep some perspective when you go through this application. What are they really asking you? And is it applicable to your operation? Call your broker and talk with them, or call your attorney and talk with them. So nonprofit directors and officers insurance. Do you even have a nonprofit? And do you want to have directors and officers insurance? That's what it's asking. In my opinion, everything's going to be again, based on my understanding, but talk with your people, your lawyer and your insurance broker. So please go through these questions, answer them honestly, and make sure that you go through the types of insurance that they might offer, because I can tell you that when this quote comes back, it's normally going to come back with 5 different kinds of policies. Maybe you don't want all 5 kinds of policies. So ask your broker, when you give this to them, what is she going to turn around and give back to you? Just because you need help understanding what you're applying for. Now, social services, residential facilities, supplemental application, residential facilities, halfway houses, shelters for abused adults, and homeless shelters. So you need to pick who you're going to work with so that way they know who they're insuring. And if there is 24/7 supervision. Now, it doesn't say here if they have to live there or not live there. We do have 24/7 house alarms that are monitored, and we don't have them on the inside because we don't want to be invasive, but we do have them on the outside. And then we also have people who, house presidents and house managers who live there, and they are welcome to correspond with our foundation 24 hours a day. And we, of course, tell them to contact um, public services 911. And so this is why those house rules were important to put up on the board. The 4 pages that I showed you when we first started this particular 1-hour class, because it actually does direct them to help 24 hours a day. So again, depending on how you're operating your facility, and this is a residential facility, a halfway house, right? Shelter for abused adults, homeless shelters. I would think most people who are taking this class, this is all going to be very applicable to you. And so you're going to want to take a look at number 3 as well. Does the organization provide medical detoxification or medical treatment services? Don't just mark yes on that, thinking that you guys are going to do that. That is a big one, because if you've never done it before, or you've never been around people that are coming off of meth or using meth or other types of drugs, that is going to require a lot of training and licensed professionals to actually do a medical detoxification or a medical treatment services. Generally speaking, in a halfway house, a shelter, or a homeless shelter, that would be different, in my opinion, than a medical detox or a medical treatment service. Do you allow stays at the shelter that exceed 2 years? I can tell you from my experience that most funding caps at 2 years, and we will get into that tomorrow, or on our next 1-hour class, is looking at the VA hospital to house grant and what they look for. They have different levels for funding, and I believe it's 2 years is the max that they will fund. Most people can transition out, but maybe you want them to stay longer than 2 years. You say that they can stay indefinitely, in which case it becomes more like permanent housing. And so I'm not sure how that would impact your application, to be honest. But you need to think about people's length of stay. Is it going to be a 6-month halfway house or shelter or homeless shelter? Is it going to be a family shelter, in which case you'll probably have men, women, children, and all sexes, and all, people who identify from all different types of identifications. How are you going to manage the risk around that when it comes to, claims, insurance claims, and making sure that people are recovering and that they're feeling very safe in that location? So these are all the things that you need to consider that are different than just having a LLC and a landlord policy and thinking that you're going to start inviting people in as a family shelter. Also, developmentally disabled, do you have someone to support them? Abused adults, Alzheimer's, dementia, mildly handicapped, severely post-detox, senior citizens, homeless. I would suggest that you Google each one of these categories and that you decide if that is something that you have a heart to staff for and to learn about, and that you want to do that long term. It is going to be like any business or anything that you care about. You're going to have good days and bad days. So what are you wanting to really focus on? So you'll just want to go ahead and read down through here. You do want to have written policies, of course. The word safe home, and keeping a shelter's location a secret, that could be interpreted a few different ways. So please read through all of this and then contact your SEMA insurance broker with any types of questions. I look forward to seeing you on the next class. Talk with you real soon. Bye-bye.